Well, it is 8:34. Our relationship with SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID, it's changing physically and mentally. Both those factors are ultimately going to shape the trajectory of the pandemic. Granted, we're certainly hoping the worst has passed here in Connecticut, but SARS-CoV-2 has surprised us before. So what does the future hold? Well, I spoke to evolutionary biologist Dr. Paul Turner to learn how viruses evolve, and I spoke to a professor of immunobiology, Dr. Akiko Iwasaki, to learn how our bodies fight viruses. One big takeaway here is that if you want clues about the future, look to the past.
Humans are no strangers to this. Even before we had very effective vaccines and other ways of slowing spread, the 1918 flu pandemic did end eventually.
It's a question of when, not if, the pandemic will end. But the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes COVID will likely survive. Because, well, it's hard to eradicate any virus.
Over time, what's going to happen is that this virus will become just like another, flu or cold virus.
In other words, there's no end in endemic. But it's not the end of the world either.
What does a parasite or a pathogen have as its agenda? To reach new hosts. And what happens to those hosts along the way could be pretty inconsequential at the time, right? If it's just trying to evolve to transmit faster.
Viruses mutate randomly. Now, the changes may make them more or less deadly to humans, but if the changes don't help the virus spread, that virus is likely to get crowded out by other versions that do spread easily. Look here, that's what Omicron here in the red did over time to Delta, which is here in the black. And Omicron did it primarily by setting up shop in people's noses and upper airways, not down in their lungs.
Often that coincides with less severity, meaning that if it can't reach the deep recesses of the lung, then there's lesser chances of pneumonia and very bad outcomes. So it tends to give up better transmission for less disease severity.
And the good news is that direction will eventually become a dead end for the virus.
It's kind of reaching a ceiling of transmissibility. It's got an upper limit to it. And in a way, that kind of becomes comforting.
Also, history may be on our side. There are other coronaviruses, and some have caused deadly but limited epidemics, like SARS and MERS. But the others who became more widespread, they now cause nothing more than seasonal head colds. Now let's talk about how the immune system is helping that transition. For all the talk about antibodies and how they wane and how people get reinfected, there's a lot more to it than that.
So the antibodies are very important in blocking the virus. But there are also this other part of immune response, which is the T cell response. And what the T cells do is they detect infected cells and kill them, so that the source of virus is now eliminated.
So in very broad terms, antibodies help to stop you from getting infected, but T cells stop you from getting really sick if you do get infected. Dr. Iwasaki said both prior infection and vaccination help in both areas, but prior infection tends to do better with stopping you from getting sick again, while vaccination is better at stopping severe illness. The point is, they're both pushing us in the right direction.
I would say that we're not there yet, though. We are still dealing with lots of hospitalization and death and severe consequences, as well as long COVID.
Long COVID's a whole other story. Ultimately, it's going to be up to all of us collectively to decide what that point of endemicity looks like. In other words, how much death and sickness are we all willing to accept in order to live our lives without restrictions? Time will tell. But both doctors said this steady advance of technology in terms of vaccines, in treatments, and in understanding the virus, all of that is going to make the trade-off as painless as possible.